Uhuru, brothers and sisters and comrades, I want to thank you for coming out to this hastily called um, discussion where I can share some information with you. I know people who've been keeping up, trying to keep up with the situation here in St. Louis, where I am located. As the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, where our headquarters is now based. And you probably are aware that a tornado came through St. Louis, and this tornado had a devastating impact on the city. But what you probably are not aware of, certainly you would not have learned that through the media, that despite the fact that they talk about $1 billion worth of damage being done by the tornado, what they don't say is that this tornado, the damage was concentrated in the African community in North St. Louis. That's really important for everybody to understand. The city would not make that obvious, would prevent this information from easily get out in the media, which is nothing but a ruling class colonial media, which generally speaking contributes to this lack of understanding and lack of knowledge of what's happening. So there are people who obviously want to do something about this and respond to it, just like any other kind of charitable cause. But they do so without recognizing that the $1 billion that they talk about repairing situation here in St. Louis subsequent to the tornado is $1 billion that's necessary in the African community. It's the African community that bore the brunt of this assault. So 3 days ago, you may have participated with me as I walked through the African community, starting on Redbud Avenue, which is where I live. 44 Bud is often referred to as, in the past, been characterized as one of the most economically depressed sectors of the city of St. Louis and in North St. Louis. But it's hard to find one place in North St. Louis that's bad as compared to other places in North St. Louis. The city initiated a program in 1972 that was called Team 4. It was something that paid a major entity to provide for them. And this was a program of economic development that was based on developing white St. Louis at the expense of the African community. And this was an actual policy. And people who are interested in this can actually Google Team 4 or T4 as it relates to St. Louis. It was an actual policy to, they call it let it rot policy, a policy that's been referred to as benign neglect for the Black people, the Black community here, the African community here in St. Louis. And as a consequence of that, even entire communities within North St. Louis, African communities have been wiped out, destroyed, purposely, consciously. Hospitals, the first African hospital west of certainly a school with teaching medical care and what have you, west of the Mississippi was right here in St. Louis. That was destroyed. Schools, generally speaking, other schools, Sumner School, which is one of the extraordinary schools that existed in this country for African people, right here in St. Louis, it was wiped out. Entire communities, as I mentioned, there's the St. Louis University occupies the property where an entire African community once was. There's a mall that is now standing where an African community once was. So within the last several years, within the last 10 years, something like 30,000 African people have been pushed out of the city of St. Louis. So there's the policy that's been going on. This happened before the tornado came through. And I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that, to recognize that the tornado was devastating. I mean, homes were blown away, tops of buildings blown away, et cetera. And as I mentioned, it's hard for anybody outside of St. Louis and sometimes inside St. Louis to recognize that this was concentrated in the African community. So I wanted to just say that. I think it's important for you to know it, for all of us to know that. when I walked through the community 3 days ago with other members of our movement and our party, we were able to show some of the devastation, the trees which have been ripped up, and even some of them which were surrounded by sidewalks. The sidewalks and the trees were ripped up, massive trees, not just small trees. Whole tops of buildings were destroyed in our community. So, as I said, this is something that happened in the African community. The attempt is going to be made to characterize what has happened as something that was simply an act of nature. And of course, we can say that the tornado was something that was provided by nature, but the devastation that impacted the African community was not all due to nature. Much of it as a consequence of the political decisions that were made by the government, that were made by particular politicians, black and white, who serve a colonial government at the expense of the African community. For example, I just mentioned the Team 4 policy designed to let this community rot. There, you could have thought a tornado or some other kind of devastating act had been committed. Even it looked like a war zone in North St. Louis. This is the place where the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru Movement have been building since 2014 to lift up, to bring the people into political motion, to activate the skills and passions and desire for freedom of our community, and to create the organization to be able to make our community better. We started that process, and this was the thing that made it necessary for us to do this, the conditions here. So this was before the tornado. And I want to mention this because all of us should understand that, everybody watching this should understand this, that there's a long-term interest that we have to have in uplifting our communities, to changing the conditions of our community, to change the circumstances of our lives as African people, whether here in the United States or in Africa or various other places in the world where we are located. Any place Africans are, the conditions are similar. And any place where we exist, you will find that it looks like a tornado has been through some other kind of what would be characterized as natural, and sometimes even war zones, it looks like, in our communities, normally and naturally. And so we are in a situation where initially, when the hurricane first came through, something like 100,000 homes lost power, were without power. I understand that today that's down to about 49 or 50,000 homes that are without power. And perhaps later on tonight, the power will be restored for most of the community. But the problem, and the thing is that the city has brought in forces from different states to participate in bringing up the lights and the power here. But the politicians have made a decision that allowed certain conditions to exist in the African community that contributed to the devastation, contributed to the amount of power that's out. For example, nature may be responsible for the tornado, but the government is the one that allowed these rotten wooden entities that function to carry electricity on these poles. That's absolutely unnecessary. The poles could not withstand anything that looked like the wind that came through here. I think up to 160 or more miles per hour winds came through, snapped those poles as like matchsticks. And of course, when they snapped the poles, live wires were everything, and lights went out. The power was lost. And even as I'm talking to you now, I'm propped up in a situation in our office on West Florissant in sweltering heat because there is no power here. Having to part the curtains, hopefully effective enough so that I can be seen. The city did that. The government did that. Nature did not make those decisions. The government made those decisions. And I'm saying this because we see throughout St. Louis an extraordinary activity and movement by the people. The people have come out on yesterday, something like 40 some odd volunteers worked with our movement, our movement alone, We've been collecting goods for the people. We've been collecting water and toilet tissue and lights. We've established charging stations so that people can come using our generators to charge their phones and their other devices so that they can communicate. So this is the kind of stuff we've been doing. We cooked food and provided food. But you've got throughout the African community, you see people coming out, acting in similar ways. They are cooking and they are passing out resources. They're driving through the communities and passing out water. These are ordinary people from the communities doing this. So the people, have an inclination all the time to solve the problems in the community. And this is something that's happened immediately. But the difference is, the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru Movement are not just involved in dealing with extraordinary events. The ordinary conditions of colonialism is something that we work with all the time. And so sooner or later, whatever resources the people have and are able to share, they won't be there. They talked about needing $1 billion to repair things here, but they're not talking about $1 billion for the African community. If they were talking about $1 billion for the African community, at least half that amount of money is already available, has been available. Money that came from COVID relief, more than $100 million, something like the amount of money that came from the sale of the Rams that they're holding on to, not doing anything for the African community. Instead, they're asking the people to come and donate to the city, as opposed to the city releasing those resources that should be coming naturally and normally to the African community. They continue to attempt to starve this community. And we are the organization that has been involved since 2014 and certainly since 2017 in driving economic development in this most impoverished community, up and down West Florissant, which is a major corridor on the one hand, but a corridor that goes through the African community now, and an African community that they've decided that they're going to allow it to rot. Benign neglect was going to happen, where thriving businesses used to be here, but the people have been pushed out. Like I said, something like 30,000 African people have been pushed out of St. Louis in the last 10 years or so. But we are the party. We came here and we organized in this city. Our headquarters is now located here. We've organized people in this city of St. Louis to move to deal with our contradictions. And this was before the tornado. This is all the time. This is because we understood that the masses of our people had to be liberated. We have to have the capacity to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. And so we were more or less prepared in the sense that so I think it's really important to, again, talk about the power of the people who came out, the people who have done all kinds of work, the people in a matter of days moved tons and tons of materials, trees that had fallen. People are using chainsaws and cutting them up and moving debris from the sidewalks. Whole roofs have come off. I don't mean the tar paper covering roof, but the roofs themselves have been blown off, and the people are dealing with this. And I think that's really important. And what's extremely important is the existence of the African People's Socialist Party on the ground. Because similar to the rest of the people, because we live in these communities, I live on Redbud. This is where the FBI and the St. Louis Police Department attacked my home, me and the Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela on July 22nd, July 29, 2022. We live there. So we live among the people, and most of our organizers live among the people. So we suffer the similar consequences, and there are people in our movement. I mean, my home was damaged by this process as well. I can't live at our home anymore because of water damage, roofs coming off. We've had, not just me, but others of us, roof came off, etc. But we are still here. And we have to be here. And that's the meaning of cadre. That's the meaning of having a revolutionary organization that's committed to an outcome that's greater than one for ourselves as individuals, even as an organization for the people. That's the thing that we work for, and to bring the people into active political life so that we can work on an ongoing basis all the time to solve these problems. There should be organizations like the was coming from our movement in virtually every community all the time, so that people are organized and be able to solve these problems. Because the truth is that the government is passing out food too. They talk about $1 billion. The government is making it possible for people to have food, but they were doing this even before. Because the fact is that they have people in St. Louis living in near starvation levels. Something like a third of the African people population in North St. Louis are trying to survive off $5 or less a day. And the fact is the government will bring and set up stations where people can come and pick up food. They drop off at the churches. People have food that people can come up and pick up off the ground and whatever. They set up hot dog stands. This is normal. So it's not that they want the people to starve, it's that they don't want our people to be able to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. And that's what the struggle against colonialism is about, to be control of our own capacity, our own resources, to live with dignity as a community. And that's what our party has been about. That's what the Uhuru Movement has been about. That's why the federal government attacked us and tried to put me in prison for 15 years, tried to put Jesse Neville and Penny Harris, who worked in the solidarity component of our party, in prison for 15 years, tried to charge us $250,000 fine because they said the work we were doing, demanding reparations, the work we were doing, building these institutions to feed, clothe, and house our people was something that was sponsored by the Russians. And the reason they have to say it was sponsored by the Russians because the work that we do is obviously something that the government should be doing. And the work that we do, our success is a criticism of the government. And so we build housings where the government won't build them. We build recreation centers where the government won't do it. And so it shows up the fact that the government is not taking on these critical questions, and somebody is. It shows that the Black people can do it ourselves, and that we can have comrades who from other communities can do it for ourselves, not on some kind of charitable basis where we love the pickaninnies kind of stuff, but because they accept the responsibility of living as colonizers on the backs of colonized people, and they've accepted that responsibility and work to make whatever kinds of contributions they can in terms of reparations, so that economic institutions can be created to repair the damage that colonialism has done to us. That's the kind of work that we've done. So I'm just saying that I think it's really important for people to understand this, and that we have been collecting food. We have been collecting all kinds of resources, toilet tissues, batteries, water, ice, and everything that the people need under these kinds of circumstances. And we want people to continue to bring resources. They talk about $1 billion that's needed, and they're talking about how it's going to be difficult to make it happen because the government moves slowly, but the people don't have to move slowly. And even as we put pressure on the government to do what has to be done in these conditions, the people ourselves can respond. So we're calling you again to go to the African People's Education and Defense Fund. Go to blackpowerblueprint.org, Northside Disaster Fund. That's one word. blackpowerblueprint.org/Northside Disaster Fund. And bring and get resources to us. The Uhuru House is on 4101 West Florissant. It's a drop-off place on the north side for donations, including water, ice, chainsaws, trash bags, gloves, batteries, flashlights, hammers, nails, screws, drills, granola bars, and also first aid items. Drop that off. You can drop it off again. This is in the north side, the African community, 4101 West Florissant, here in St. Louis. And on the south side, where the majority of the settlers live, the majority of the white people live, on the south side is Uhuru Solidarity Center. Uhuru Solidarity Center. That's at 2654 Gravois Avenue. That's Gravois, Gravois Avenue. That's 2654 Gravois Avenue, Gravois Avenue. And here your tax donations are tax exempt, and they go to the African People's Education and Defense Fund. So I'm calling on you to unite with this, and I'm calling on you. Every community, every African community should be engaged in preparations to take care of ourselves in this fashion. We have organized in this movement. One of the reasons that we do the political work in the electoral system is because in these systems, these elected officials on the local level, they make the decisions that allow these deteriorating conditions to be here, that promote them. They are the ones who are responsible for these matchsticks that they call electrical poles to be here that crush, they snap like match stems. That's why we do it. That's why we appreciate people like Charles Barron, who promotes this in terms of the kind of political work we're involved in. That's why we appreciate people like Jesse Todd, who is here in St. Louis, who fought for the people on a local level to take back these rights that we fought for. We, not the Black petty bourgeoisie, we are the ones who fought for that. Black people died. Fannie Lou Hamer was beaten and what have you. Ella Baker, all kinds of people put their lives on the line. King died just for the ability to participate in this electoral process. But then by the time we won this right to participate in elections, by the time, based on Malcolm X's definition of determination that it's going to be the ballot or the bullet, and Malcolm X's program for Black nationalism, economic development, political control of our communities, they killed Malcolm in '65. They killed King in '68. They just attacked the Black Panther Party throughout the '60s and what have you. And they took away from us and left the only ones having access to the electoral process were sellouts, who they wanted to promote. I'm saying that we have to, that's why we have taken on this role of electoral politics. It's not because we have undying faith in elections, it's because we fought for that space and because it's the democratic space that we fought for. SNCC fought for that. As a member of SNCC, I fought for the democratic space so that we can participate in voting without being killed. That's a right that we won on the ground, that people died making that happen. And so we're not going to allow them to take that from us. They've contaminated the whole idea of electoral politics among Black people because of what they've done. They kill off the revolutionaries, they destroyed our own programs, and then by the time you can participate in an election, you got nobody to vote for, nothing to vote for. You've got these sellouts who call themselves revolutionaries. Sometimes they call themselves that. Most times they don't even call themselves revolutionaries. But we need to bring that back. So that's part of what it is that we do. We organize political party. A political party is always an organization of a particular class of people. Ours is a party of the African working class. The African working class is central to the liberation of African people and the destruction of this social system that oppresses and exploits everybody. So even the settlers who've gone along with what this system does are exploited by this process. Even people who now think that they're in hog's heaven because of the kind of dirty stuff that this current administration is doing, they're going to find out that that's not the truth, that they're going to pay a terrible price for the economic policies that's impacting people now, because it's a colonial policy and they don't recognize their own relationship to colonialism. Colonialism is the driving force for everything that's happening in the world today, and we have to be on top of it. So everywhere you're located, we need to be having charging centers, charging capacity, batteries to deal with these kinds of contradictions, which is why we created the African People's Socialist Party, created the African People's Education and Defense Fund, where we can organize doctors and nurses and engineers and people with certain kinds of skills to participate. That's why we created the Black Ankh, which is our response to the Red Cross, so that we can empower these communities to deal with issues, heart attacks, deal with issues like bleeding, deal with all kinds of health-related issues that's in our community. So I'm saying this is what it is that we're about. And that, again, people should contribute to the African People's Education and Defense Fund. We tried to raise $25,000. This is for a community relief fund. People can continue to go to blackpowerblueprint.org/Northside Disaster Fund. One word, blackpowerblueprint.org/Northside Disaster Fund, and make contributions there. People can come, if you're anywhere in the general region of St. Louis, to the Uhuru House at 4101 West Florissant. It's a drop-off place for the North Side, for donations, including water, ice, chainsaws, trash bags, gloves, batteries, flashlights, hammers, nails, screws, drills, granola bars, and first aid items. And then on the South Side, where the majority of the colonizers, the white people, live, you can drop off at Uhuru Solidarity Center. That's at 2654 Gravois Avenue. That's Gravois, Grabois Avenue, 2654 Gravois Avenue. And the donations are tax exempt, going to the African People's Education and Defense Fund. And so this is what I want to share with you. And I'm hoping that you'll keep your eyes here, because even when people think they know what it is they're seeing, the political issues are sometimes masqueraded, and you can't actually know what's happening. Because, yeah, they talk about $1 billion for St. Louis because of the tornado. But what they don't say is that $1 billion need to come to an African community that bore the brunt. I went to South St. Louis on the very day this tornado came through, and was talking to some white people, and these are activists, which presupposes a certain kind of progressivism on their part, people who keep up what's going on. And they're telling me events they were doing. They asked me what happened. I'm telling them how North St. Louis has been devastated, and they were shocked. They had no idea that it was going on. So in the same city, if people don't know what the hell is going on, I know you don't know in the various places that you're located, despite the fact they may show something bad happen in St. Louis. They don't show that it's concentrated. It's a concentrated destruction based on policies that the depth of which, based on political determination, political decisions made by a colonial administration that's also comprised of Black people and white people. And I want to make this clear, because we're not involved in a struggle against racism, because the struggle against racism in many ways has been won. That's why you had a Black mayor. That's why we have Black people on these boards of alderpersons. That's why we had a Black person who represented St. Louis in the U.S. Congress, because of the struggle, the victory of the struggle against racism that I participated in. But the victory only meant that these people were able to go up into the colonial structure and participate equally, or almost equally, or substantially in the colonial exploitation and oppression of the rest of us. So we're talking about a fight against colonialism. And the next time you hear this person who telling you how wonderful they are because they've been involved in electoral work, if they were somehow dismissed. Now the current climate, they can no longer be the congressperson, and they can no longer be the person who represents this or that. Ask them if they were like Charles Barron. Ask them who brought reparations to the city council in New York. Ask them who fought for the release of Black political prisoners. Ask them if they were like Jesse Todd, who put together a plan even before this tornado came through to try to deal with the tornado that's represented by the colonialism itself, the colonial mode of production. So thank you, comrades, brothers and sisters. I know I've spoken for a long time, but I appreciate the fact that you've been here with me. And I hope, among other things, that you will share this. Share it, share it, share it. Get the word out. The people need to know what's happening, and the people need to begin to prepare. We need to begin to prepare ourselves wherever we are. There are people who are talking about having to prepare themselves from the consequences of the Trump election. But I'm saying that we have to be prepared wherever we are for all the conditions that impact us, because Trump is not the mayor of St. Louis. Trump was not in the government in St. Louis. It's the total colonial oppression, which means that they have taken from us and absconded with our capacity to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. And that's what the fight is all about, to negate this foreign entity that rests upon the backs, eat the flesh of our children and our future. Thank you. Uhuru.